James Makoviak, and I'm the outreach coordinator for this, what we now call the Green Line Extension Project. It's always been the Green Line Extension Project, but in the past, we've always referred to it as the Southwest Light Rail Transit Project. And as we're moving through construction now, we're moving toward the official name, of course, an extension being of the Green Line, which currently runs between Minneapolis and St. Paul. So we are officially the GLE, or Green Line Extension Project. I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping issues as before we get going. This virtual town hall is meant to be very, informal. It's meant to be informative, and we're here to answer your questions. So the program will be very simple. We've got probably, 20-minute slideshow or so that I will go through, and it covers just sort of a high-level overview of recent announcements, and then 21 recap, 2022 overview, and then of construction, and then a little bit about some upcoming outreach events and what we're doing this summer in Minnetonka. So before I start, I'm just going to go around the horn here and just kind of introduce people who I see on the line here. Again, my name's James Makoviak. I've got some colleagues on the phone. I've got Nikongo, I've got David and Trevor and Michelle Nelson, who are from the project office. And then I've got a couple guests as well. I've got Councilman Brian Kirk. Hello, Councilman. Thank you for joining us. I've got Donald and Dustin and Julie Wishnak, who's the Community Development Director for the city of Minnetonka, and Nathan and Ray. So if I've missed anybody, I apologize. I imagine people will continue to join us. I'm hoping as we go. But before I begin the presentation, I'll just ask if there's any general questions to start the meeting. We're all basically self-muted. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself, and then you'll be heard by everyone, and then we'll respond to that question. It may be more than me responding. We've got my colleagues here from construction staff, other outreach staff as well, communication staff, who might have something they want to add as well. And then finally, I just want to let you know that this meeting is recorded and will be posted, I believe, on our webpage at some point, probably later this week. All right, before I go on, does anybody have any preliminary comments or questions? All right, if not, I will get right to the video. Just give me a moment to queue it up here. Share my screen. All right, I'm presuming everybody can see that. All right, again, welcome to the Metro Green Line Extension Virtual Town Hall for the city of Minnetonka. This is the first of 5 town hall meetings we're doing. We're doing one in every city. That'll include Eden Prairie tomorrow night. Then we've got Hopkins St. Louis Park in Minneapolis as well coming up this month. Some of you may be familiar with, for some reason here, hang on a second. All right, today's topics. Do a basic project overview. As I said, we'll do a project update, recap of 2021, construction highlights. We've got some photographs of the work that we've completed, and we got a brief description of some of the work that we'll be doing in 2022. And then we're also going to include just a short presentation on the systems overview. And of course, the systems is the contract that follows the civil project. As you know, we've got about 4 contracts on this project. We've got our rail cars you see on the right here, and I think we've got about 27 or 28 of those. And then, of course, we have the civil contract with all the walls, with the bridges, with everything that you see being built today, stations, and that's followed by the electrification of the system, of the light rail system, what we just generically call the systems contract. And that's going to be following in Eden Prairie and starting probably a little bit in Minnetonka as well this year. And they'll continue as civil work is completed in portions along the alignment. And then finally, just a brief overview of the outreach. All right, project overview. Here we go. This is probably a slide that's very familiar to some of you who've been on these meetings before, who attended meetings where we've made presentations. You know, we're 14.5 miles, 16 new stations. And of course, that one-seat ride from Eden Prairie to downtown St. Paul at Target Field, you will connect with both the Blue Line and the Green Line, and also make connections when this is completed to other bus routes as well. The scope of the civil project here is, again, mentioned the 16 new stations. We've got 44 new structures. It's obviously a very large project, 29 new bridges, some of these over 3,000 feet long. Some very complex construction, and that includes some pedestrian bridges and roadway and freight bridges as well. We've got 7 existing bridges with modifications, and then of course 6 pedestrian tunnels, 2 cut and cover tunnels. We've got the Kenilworth tunnel, you can see, is over 2,000 feet, and then we have the Highway 62 tunnel, about 582 feet, going from Eden Prairie to Minnetonka. Essentially, that's where the portion of Minnetonka begins. 15 at-grade crossings, 127 retaining walls. We've got that. You can see some of the other statistics. All right, project update. As most of you have already heard, we have had we've announced some changes. Originally, we had hoped to create revenue operating services by 2023. But over the past couple of years, we've had some scope increases that were unanticipated, not unusual in any kind of construction project to have changes occur. But these were significant changes that occurred. The first was the corridor protection wall. That was designed by the railroad. It basically separates our light rail eventually from the freight rail. And while negotiating with the freight rail, they insisted that there be some kind of degree of safety separating our track and their track in the eventuality that track might separate, train might separate, might roll over or something like that. They wanted to ensure the safety of their trains and our trains. So that's about a mile-long wall. And at the time we began construction, we did not have a final design for that. And that came in, I believe, a little over a year ago. And then, of course, we priced that out, and that added a lot of time and, additional scope to the civil contract where the contractor had already bid on that. So we had to find a way to include that as well. And then, of course, we also have the secant retaining wall, and that is in the Kenilworth. That's associated with the, what's that? Somebody say something? All right, that's the secant wall. You can see this. It's the Kenilworth tunnel. That's one of the steps here that we have added in the development of that tunnel, in the construction of that tunnel, and then finally Eden Prairie Town Center Station. You see on the bottom here, which was originally a part of the project and then was cut when we had to make some initial financial decisions, and we had to cut a certain amount off the project back in, I think, 2015. And so that station was removed. Eden Prairie insisted that they wanted to have that. They raised the money for that. And then we included it back in the project after we began. So all of these were added to the contract after we issued the contract, creating the increase in the scope. And of course, the scope has its own impacts. Just going off the screen here. Hang on a second. Sorry, folks. All right. So after we have these scope increases, obviously that has an impact on the contracts that follow. I mentioned the systems earlier. So we've got your original civil construction schedule and cost, right? 2018, when we put the bid out, when we issued the civil contract. And then, of course, with the addition of these new items, we have new civil construction agreement and change orders, obviously, along the way. That's added an additional 34 months. And as you know, it's like a domino effect. Once you change one portion of the contract, contracts that follow also are impacted as those contractors are waiting to do their work, and there are associated costs with overtime of increase in the cost of their lead items. And so all of these are all consequences of shifts and change, which then lead to the revised civil construction schedule and revised costs that we announced a little bit later last year. So the revised project schedule and cost process, the current step, taken together, these issues impact right? As I mentioned, the other green line extensions like the systems, and it follows that is the testing systems that, and of course the ticket booths and the coordination of the stations, right? Those contracts that follow are all affected. Staffing, supplies, overall project schedule. So now that we have a revised civil schedule and cost, and then of course we have to add that to the revised system schedule and cost, and then revise to the supporting contracts, testing schedule, and then we get again the revised project opening day and cost that we announced. So again, revised civil construction schedule and cost adds additional 34 months. The revised system schedule and cost, we're in the process of actually negotiating that with the systems contractor, another joint venture, Aldridge Parsons. And then we have a revised the final contract, the revised supporting contracts and testing, and those all still have to be negotiated. Once those are all negotiated, we will have that revised project opening day and cost. So we've added at this point an estimated project cost of 2.65 billion, 2.75, and then of course we have revised costs will be known, the final cost when all the agreements are finalized, and we're projecting the opening day now for 2027. I don't know why I'm having a little trouble advancing this thing, but hitting all the right buttons. There we go. All right, project budget. We've undergone cost-cutting measures already, but we are building, as you can see out there, a very solid, well-constructed line that will meet the needs of our community. Right now, we're about 60% complete of meaningful reductions, in the scope are not really available. Additional funding will be needed to complete the project, and as we've done in the past, we continue to work with our partners to identify funding solutions, and we're fairly confident that we will find those solutions and we will deliver this project. And of course, as people often ask, could you stop the project? Of course, that would be much more costly and kind of going backwards. So how do the costs compare? I think, when you buy a house, when you buy a car, right, you do a cost comparison compared to other models, similar models, other houses, similar sizes, similar neighborhoods. And when you look at the light rail system, I think it's appropriate to do the same thing. And when you compare our project to our peer groups, that projects going on, I think there are 4 lines going on in Seattle. There's a couple in Portland, Houston. Our costs are currently at or below their similar projects, even after the projected increases. Before the increases, we were about 152 million per mile. And then the Green Line extension, revised Green Line extension is about 180, 190. And the average cost between our peer projects is between 200 and 500 million per mile. And here you see some other statistics related to these comparisons. We're looking at the different lengths, number of stations, and you can see these are all very different. And depending on, the kinds of challenges that they're facing, they may have additional tunnels, longer tunnels, deeper tunnels. They may have just more bridges, or they just might be on the surface. All of those variables are important in considering, the comparison and looking at it and making sense of some of these numbers. All right, in addition to those scope increases, we already see economic development occurring along the LRT construction along our corridor. We've got over $2 billion in permitted and planned community development. And if you go down to Opus, right, I'm sure Julie can tell you, we've got the Dominium, which was fairly new. Before that, the Rise, and there are currently, I think, 3 other developments within a corridor of our station in Opus that are currently planned and or underway. But you can see it's happening all over the corridor here. Okay, we try very hard, right, to meet about a 15% ratio of hiring disadvantaged businesses, what we call DBEs, and you can see in the civil and systems, the Franklin OMF was the operations maintenance facility. If you remember, back in 2015, we actually had an operational maintenance facility along this corridor. But as a result of cost-cutting measures, we removed it and we expanded the existing OMF and Franklin Street associated with the blue line there. So, but all of that work, we've been able to maintain a relatively high percentage, and we're continuing to try very hard to meet our goals. You can see the amount of money that's going out to DBEs as well. And then, of course, it goes beyond just DBEs. Obviously, you can see that you've got over $53 million in pay going to 65 of the 87 counties in Minnesota so far as of July 2021. So that money is dispersed throughout our general economy. More than 1.8 million hours worked. You could see, again, paychecks for Minnesotans worth more than 53 million from 75% of the counties. And then, of course, the disadvantaged business statistics. And supporting, in general, 7,500 construction and construction-related jobs and large payroll. All right, getting through this, before I go any further, does anybody have any questions about some of the material already presented? Right, if not, then we will go on to the 2021 recap.
I have a quick question.
Sure. What do you got?
So, like, if you're referring back to like that first picture that you had with like the red circles and everything, kind of like those key, like expensive like area locations.
Let's see. Tell me when I'm there. Oh, jeez, I'm sorry.
I think it was like your first slide or something, or maybe the first couple.
Whoops, wrong way. Oh, spoiler alert. One of these?
Yeah, pretty much one of those, but with like the red.
Oh, I think you're thinking of this one.
Yeah, I was wondering, with it opening up in 2027 now, and I think it was anticipated for like 2023.
Yep.
Do you think like those in between areas? Because I guess I would say I'm over in the Shady Oak, downtown Hopkins, Opus location area. Do you think like there's potential where you guys would just like not have it have a complete connection, and maybe you guys would try and like, you know, get neighborhoods and people in like those residential areas, like, you know, putting some sort of like monetary value, like in like a partial system connection or anything?
Right. So if I hear you correctly, it's a very good question. I think you're asking, we've heard it and we hear it often. It's, if essentially the long lead item here, right, would be the tunnel in Kenilworth, right? So as you can see already along the corridor, a lot of the civil infrastructure is already completed, or it's going to be completed this year. And systems is going to continue to work in Eden Prairie, Minnetonka. So you go all the way to Hopkins, right? So you're asking, right, can we just run the train in between there? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. We've looked at that, and unfortunately, it's just too complex given the logistics and trying to, after we run the testing, in order to run that operation, properly as an extension of the Green Line. It just, from what I've understood, it's just not possible really to do that. But it's a very good idea. But when it comes down to actually operationally making that happen, it just is something that is not feasible with all the variables involved. But when we get to that fourth contract, right, there'll be quite a period of time where testing will begin. And one of the things that we are considering doing is, before even those connections are made, was starting some of the testing to try to get a head start then. And so then you will be seeing, right, empty cars running between Eden Prairie, maybe as far as St. Louis Park, and we'll start, trying to get ahead of that process of testing and coordination that needs to take place, so that at the time, that portion, the rest of the alignment is online, then we'll be ahead of the game. We can shorten probably the overall length of the testing and hopefully speed up the revenue service operation. But in terms of splitting that up, that's not going to be feasible, unfortunately. But it's a great question.
With it being like 60% done, would you say like a large portion of this is just mostly the funding then? Because I feel like you guys started doing the construction like a year and a half ago, or maybe it has a couple of years here now, but it just seems like funding with it being postponed this long.
Yeah. Are you asking, essentially where that extra time is going to be invested?
Yeah, and I guess it might be in just that complex areas that are on this like map.
Right. You're looking at the center, the C camp pile. Follow that arrow over, And that's where you're seeing some of the some of the methodological challenges, frankly, in building a half-mile long tunnel and in a very narrow corridor. And again, if you've ever kind of watched any engineering shows on television, I like those shows. The big engineering projects that go on all over the world. You often see engineers in the field needing to pivot when they begin, put a shovel in the ground and they begin encountering variables that didn't come up, during the design phase, or how conditions might shift or change. And as those things have shifted and changes, we've had to make some methodological pivots, but we're continuing to find ways to work through those challenges. But it's taking a lot longer. It's adding that portion, and finishing that work requires, I think that's most of that 34 months, if I'm correct. And what I recommend you do, we've also got some really good moving, visual animations online. I know I've got Trevor Roy, our communications guy here, and even you can go on YouTube, or you can go on our webpage in the communications, or you look for project videos. And there's a really good explanation of all the steps that go into the construction of this tunnel and the completion of this tunnel. And it's very useful. It's not that difficult, but to follow, it's just a few minutes, I think 3 or 4 minutes, but it's a great summary.
Thank you. Yep, that's understandable. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for your questions. All right, then.
I have a question regarding the budget increase. I think you mentioned additional sources of funding or business partners. What are some examples of that?
Well, in terms of our funding partners, I think our primary funding partner is probably Hennepin County. Now, I don't know for a fact, but potential funding sources could be, federal sources, could be state sources, but I think primarily our partnership, up to this point has been with Hennepin County. But I don't think those sources have been identified at this point. But again, they're our partners. They're deeply committed to seeing this through, and they will work with us in order to identify those partnerships for additional funding.
Okay. And then I had one other additional question on you had a slide as far as cost comparison between this project and similar projects.
Yeah.
Was any additional cost benefit analysis done within the scope of this project itself, meaning cost per, route option 1, route option 2?
Yeah, that's an excellent question.
People served on each option.
Yeah. I don't think the way these projects run is, these things are heavy lift, right? This project's been in the works for over 20 years. I think the first reference, I've been with the project for 7 years. And I think when I came on board, the first reference I found was 1988, and at that point it was just a dream, right? And it was a Hennepin County document. And I think at that point they estimated it would be like $500,000. So we missed that boat. That would have been a deal. But, these things take a long time. So they start with the county, right? And then the county basically goes through the process of defining what we call the LPA, the locally preferred alternative. And this is a process. I know Julie could speak to this. I'm sure she was involved in Minnetonka, where we work with our city partners, wherever, in terms of where the alignment is going through. And we have, lengthy discussions about and input about where the best place for that alignment is, right? So I know down in Eden Prairie, I think when you got into Eden Prairie, I think at some point there were, I want to say, between 8 and 12 alternatives, right? So this process is sort of done long before, right? You begin the design phase. You sort of know where that locally preferred alternative is going to be, and there's a collaborative process that goes on with our partners, with our city partners, with I don't know if the FTA is involved at that point, and it's quite extensive and involved, and a decision is made, all things considered, of where that is. So at this point, that decision's already been made, and at this point, changing the alternative is not on the table.
James, this is David with, I guess, a comment, and it's intended to be as constructive as possible. But
okay.
I don't know where you live, but before I would put Hennepin County on the hook for more money, you may want to look at your property tax assessment, and you may want to, as an institution, you may want to think about pressure that the county is going to come under financially, because they've bitten off massive projects and plans and programs, and there may be significant pushback. So just, I mean, keep it in mind, please. Money's not, money's not immediately available.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I live in Minnetonka, and I will just say that before I came out of this project, I did not work. I never worked in the public sector, and coming from a more conservative background, I think I had a lot of suspicions about the public sector and about how it does business. We all have a certain perception of the time it takes to do something in the public sector as a private sector. But having worked for 7 years, I can tell you I've got a great deal of appreciation for the integrity of the people in the cities, right? The staff in the cities, the people who work in the councils, the Met Council. From the inside, tremendous integrity, tremendous professionalism, people who are very aware of that and are very cognizant of that money, and appreciate that comment very much. I'll add that as well. And are trying their best, right, as the ones tasked with constructing this and building it, to be as amenable as we can, to the considerations that you're pointing out, right? These are, let's face it, right? We're living in some difficult economic times at the moment with inflation and other factors. We just come through 2 years of COVID. Sure. I mean, we appreciate that. And, we take your point of view very seriously. And that is something that we will continue to do. We don't make these changes lightly. We're just trying to do everything we can as economically as we can, as strange as that might sound, given the number, in order to complete this job that we were tasked to build. So thank you for that. Okay, can we go on? All right. No more questions. We got plenty of time. Got a whole hour here. Got another half an hour. So there's no rush. You can stay late if somebody has some additional questions. All right, I'll go forward here to our project. I'm going backwards. Okay, here we go. Here's the recap. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are several contracts. There are several phases here. A good portion of what was done in the first year had nothing much to do necessarily with the LRT operation. There were all these utilities that, and I think we had you'll see a number after this, I think over 1,300 or so private public utilities that had to be resolved, moving lines and so on and so forth throughout the corridor, and putting in new utilities, right? I mean, oftentimes in conversations with the city, the city has plans too. And if we're in a certain area where, they had plans to make some improvements, well, we were able to work together to do those improvements while we were already there, rather than to have to, double up and come back and do it. So the utilities was a major enterprise. It took a long time. And then of course the site prep, and then what you see happening now, that's where we're at, that 60%. And I think about 62% completion now for structures, track, and stations. And, you can see all of that. And then of course, you'll start to see, especially down in Eden Prairie, this fourth element, the systems, the electrification, and all the elements going into that as well. And then, of course, finally, as I said, we've got that last contract. We've got that testing, safety comms, the operator training, right? So on and so forth. How does this thing keep doing this? Anybody have any suggestions here? When I stop it a long time, it just kind of stalls on me here. All right. All right, as you can see, again, 25 bridges are underway out of 29, 8 tunnels out of the 8, 114 retaining walls we've got underway here. Good percentage of those, if you drive through Opus, you'll see them there. In Minnetonka, we've got 95%. Again, there's the number on the private utilities, the number on the public utilities, the number of building demolitions. the number of LRV vehicles Siemens has created for us that have been delivered already. And then, of course, that expansion of that operation and maintenance facility existing in Franklin Street. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm having what's going on with my computer here, but I will persevere. All right, here's a nice picture taken from the top of the Optum building. And you can see, follow my arrow here, here is the south side, the very side of our Highway 62 tunnel that's underway. And it goes, of course, under 62. We did that in 2 parts. And we've put 62 back pretty much in its final condition. I think there's a little road work still left to be done, but nothing terribly inconveniencing. And then on the other side, you see the north part of the tunnel coming out of the tunnel. And then you can follow here through the corridor. Here's the station up here. And then we swing around and basically run north. We call Opus Hill between Feltle Road and the Claremont Apartments to get to Smetana Drive. Oh, come on. The Congressman David, if you have any suggestions about why I am not able to advance this, I would certainly appreciate that.
They wouldn't do that to us.
Hang on a sec. Appreciate your patience. All right. All right. All right. And again, then in addition, we have 11 of the 16 stations underway. You can see one of our tours there on the bottom right. And the construction highlights, again, 60% done. I'm going the other way. All right. 62 shift. You know, as I just mentioned, when we were building the tunnel, we built it 1/2 at a time. So we had to, you know, reroute a portion of Highway 62, and then we put it all back together again. Here's some other nice photos of the northern part of the tunnel house as it enters Opus. And that's inside the tunnel house where the tracks are being laid. And Opus Station, the one station in Minnetonka, right alongside, if you know Opus in Minneapolis, Smart and East Bren Road. You can see some of the retaining walls here. To the left here, that's the Dominium, the new apartment building, just off of East Bren Road. And you can see it's like a castle-like moat down below there. It's a very large retaining wall that dovetails with a bridge that's painted there on the left-hand side that the city constructed last year. And then, of course, you see the scale of the retaining wall here along Opus Hill here, and that's Claremont on the left, if you know that area. And we're walking south there. And then we've got Smetana Bridge, as you know, on the right-hand side, you can see we've completed the bridge at that point, and they're doing the tar seal and putting the road back together that was opened later last year. But before it was, we had taken a tour down there, and people were able to walk down and see some of the construction, see some of the scale of some of the work we were completing. And then, of course, at the end of the Minnetonka corridor, we have the Minnetonka-Hopkins Bridge. It's the longest bridge in the corridor, over 3,000 feet. You can see the scale of some of those beams. If anybody lives nearby there, you know, you'd be glad to know that all that noise from driving pile has been completed in that area. And we laid those heavy beams. We're finishing up the superstructure this year, so work will continue. And you can see in the distance here, that bridge just continues. It goes over the railroad tracks there near Shady Oak Road and all the way lands by K-Tel Drive. And there's just a photo looking from Greenfield Apartments. Smetana Drive would be on your left. And this is kind of looking west, southwest at those beams and the piles after it was completed. All right, 2022, looking forward, you can see we got a construction map here, and you can see some of the ongoing work and I'll go into some detail here in the next slide. In bridges and tunnels, we've got the track work, you know, that we're working on now in the LRT tunnel. As I mentioned, the Minnetonka-Hopkins Bridge, Feltle Road, there's a bridge we're completing there. And at the end of this season, we anticipate Feltle Road will be restored. So that connection, Feltle Road to Smetana Road for people who drive into the park from the north will be, or out in that area will be complete. Traffic impacts, we have a few that are currently underway as, you know, we're working sort of right south of Minneapolis Mart, if you know the area, red and yellow circle drives. We've got a little short-term closure to reconstruct Green Circle. And then, of course, we'll continue track work. You can see some of the photos there. Again, the tunnel house, and then that's a pedestrian tunnel there. We're going to have a really beautiful beautification, I think, of some of the trail systems there as we, that trail system will all be restored there in Opus. All right, and some of the highlights, again, the station, Opus Station, we'll continue to finish that. And then, as I said, systems work will begin some preliminary work in Minnetonka this year. And then again, this year, some of the milestones are we want to see red circle, yellow circle, green circle, Feltle Road, like Smetana Drive last year, in their final condition. So we've got a lot of work to do, and then finishing all the retaining walls, and then Opus Station will be substantially completed as well. And they'll continue on the track work. Okay. Any questions?
I have one.
Yep.
This audit that we hear about going, is that going to affect this summer's construction season?
No, I don't believe it. There's no expectation that that'll happen. No.
Do we have any idea how long that audit's going to take?
I don't know. No, I don't think at this point we know. I think that's still working its way through the legislature. And once that process has been completed, we'll probably have a better idea. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I got to keep going through this share screen or to kind of reboot it. All right. The systems contractor is Aldridge Parsons joint venture. Again, two fairly large electric companies. They got about 25 people, 40 to 50 workers, and then they got 25 subcontractors. You can see here, we have the traction power substations, or what we call TPSSs. There's about 15 or 16 of them. And that's what actually powers the corridor, the train along the corridor. You'll have these large catenaries eventually along the track, which you've probably seen if you've seen the LRT downtown. And they will be powered by these TPSS stations, which are located throughout the corridor. This is the first one they've been working on in Eden Prairie. It's the foundation, and on top of that, you will see something like this. And that'll be the TPSS house. It looks basically like a container. And then inside, you've got some pretty sophisticated electric equipment. Right, and finally, just communications and outreach. So far in the 3.5 years since 2018, roughly, going on 4 years now, construction, we have about 16,600 subscribers to our weekly construction updates. In the wintertime, we slow that down to bi-weekly because there's not as much work going on, but I'm sure we're going to go back to the weekly schedule just to keep people updated. It's a great resource. You can go on our webpage and you'll be able to subscribe to that, put an email address in, and then you will get the most recent update every Friday afternoon, late Friday afternoon generally. And that'll also include any detours, right? Any maps that might be available in order to help our residents plan, their transportation and plan their week. So we also have a hotline. We've gotten hundreds of hotline calls over the last couple of years. In the past year, they've slowed down a little bit in Minnetonka. We got about 19 calls from Minnetonka residents. And then, of course, I personally get hundreds of calls or emails from community members that, we work to help resolve any issues or any questions that they address to us. You can see my email address there. Please feel free, of course, to contact me for any reason whatsoever. I always enjoy hearing from the residents, and will do my best to try to resolve any issues that or any questions that you have. We also have something called the Construction Information Work Group. It's kind of the committees that we have after the design phase. During design, we have like a business advisory committee, community advisory committee, and they give us input during the design phase. And after that, we've kind of phased those out. We meet occasionally with the business advisory committee, but we have what's called the Construction Information Work Group, or CIW. These are city-nominated folks in the community, business owners, just community members who participate in meetings that we hold once a month, once every 2 months, depending generally on need and the level of construction. and they give us input. How are we doing? How can we do things better? It's a fairly useful committee group. We've had 4 of those. We had a quarterly schedule this past year, and then one of the big changes, I think something new that we did this past year was we had public walking tours, and we posted those on our webpage. We'll do a few more of those this year as well. And those are great for people who are interested in seeing the construction up close, because we give you vests, hard hats, and we set you up, and we go out for about an hour, hour and a half, and we have subject matter experts, and we take interested residents right down into the guts of what we're doing. Last year we were down by the station, of course, right down near the entrance to the tunnel. We walked the corridor with all those large retaining walls and under the bridge and the bridge beams and the piling that was going on at the time. So they were really well received, and they were a lot of fun. And so we'll continue those, as I said, this coming year. We'll also have pop-up events, right? And we'll also continue to attend community events. We're really looking forward to getting back out in the community. After COVID for 2 years, there's very little opportunity to do that for obvious reasons. And I know some of those restrictions have been relaxed, and we're looking forward to going to the citywide event at Minnetonka, if they're holding it this year, and other events that we're invited to. If you know anybody or any community group, it doesn't matter how large or how small, or just a group of people who'd like to get together and get more information about what we do and about the project, let me know. We're more than happy to create that opportunity. And then again, finally, I mentioned earlier that biweekly construction update that come in your email if you choose to sign up for that. And again, here, social media here on email, Twitter, and Instagram, and you can see our website there. It's also still available with swlrt.org, and that'll take you right to our webpage where we have the latest news, to sign up if you want for the construction update, and also just lots of recent great information. And these videos, for instance, and there's a lot of good stuff there for people who are interested. And that is the end of my presentation. So thank you for bearing with me as I tried to get through that thing without. All right. If anybody's not all sleepy, I appreciate, again, your attentiveness. And I'd just like to know, does anybody have any questions or comments before we move on?
James, Brian Kirk here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, a question about the disrupted bike trails. They've been rerouted now for quite a while. When can we expect some of those to reopen in Minnetonka?
All right, I am going to toss that one to, in Minnetonka? Okay, I was going to toss that one to my colleagues who deals with that quite a bit in Hopkins, and along Minneapolis. But in terms of Minnetonka, we've had that discussion recently where here's some of the difficulty in answering that question. I mean, presumably we'd like to complete most of the civil construction, right? Put that all back together and therefore create the opportunity. And that would include, right, the trails that we have disrupted, reconnecting them. That's part of, what we need to reconstitute. And in theory, we were attempting to put that all back together by the end of this year. Now, one caveat is that due to these scope increases that, we talked about earlier, there's been a fairly lengthy and deep dive, into these contracts and into our schedule, and looking at the implications of these changes on the schedule. And then, of course, the negotiations that have gone on in some detail and some depth over the past year for the most, and basically. And so they are putting the finishing touches on the new baseline schedule, Brian. So that has not been finalized yet. I know they're pretty close. We anticipate that that's probably something that we're going to see in the next month or two as we begin to roll out, the spring construction schedule. So I can't say definitively that was the goal before, right? We break the alignment up into 16 segments for the contractor between east and west, right? 8 and 8, just to make it manageable, small bits. And, those segments are completed, right? They're all completed at a different stage. And segments 5, I would say segments 6, 7, and 8 are in Minnetonka. And those segments, except for the completion of the full completion of the Minnetonka Hopkins Bridge, were supposed to be complete. So rather, sorry for all the long-windedness and the caveats, but the short answer is we still hope, as planned, to get that put together this year. We had some conversations, I think, with Julie in the previous Minnetonka meeting. We coordinate every week or two. I know that's something very much that they want us to move forward with, and something we anticipating to do this year, unless, of course, we this new baseline schedule pushes that out a bit. But so I'll let you know. I can let you know. But it's something on all our minds too. I got a son who goes to Eagle Ridge, right? And I watch these kids walking along the road because that trail is cut off currently that takes them under Bren Road West, up and around, going home. Many of these kids to Dominion apartments there. So something we'll work on.
Are you able to provide an update on the tunnel in the Kenilworth section?
Can you be more specific? Because if you can be more specific, then I will hand this question off to our tunnel expert. David Davies is my colleague and my counterpart in Minneapolis. He's the outreach coordinator there and our supervisor of outreach. And David is very well versed with that. So can you rephrase that with some more specificity? If David is still here, David, are you still here? David might have bolted. I think there's a David here, but I'm guessing that's a guess.
Yeah, James, I don't think that's David Davies.
Okay, so it looks like David's gone. Okay, can you rephrase that question? We can give it a shot to Congo and I, or Michelle. Michelle is also on the line here. Michelle Nelson is our council authorized representative. She kind of oversees all the construction on the west side.
Sure. So to add some additional context, reading the news, we see things like foundation cracking and structural concerns with the condo building, construction being paused, no restart date,
Okay,
shifting, settling. I'm just kind of curious what the current status of all that is.
sure, I can answer that. And please, my colleagues, if anybody wants to add anything, please feel free to do that. But you're right, there was some cracking observed at the Sika building near the Kenilworth Tunnel. And we obviously immediately ceased construction there. And over the last, I want to say, at least 4 weeks or so, we have been collaborating with specialists that we have hired and brought in to evaluate that situation. So they are currently still evaluating that situation. And I'm not sure, I haven't heard when their study will be complete. But that is something obviously we take seriously. We don't know why that happened yet. We're not sure, but that is something that we're going to fully investigate. And once we make that clear, that will obviously be known to the public. Trevor, do you have anyone to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I would just say that the professionals that we've hired that are currently investigating it are the same people that investigated the 9/11 World Trade Center, the I-35W bridge collapse. These are not, contrary to what you may have heard in the public sphere, these are not bought and paid for Metropolitan Council shills. That is not what we do on this project. We want to make sure that we're preserving property. And, in the forefront of our mind is safety. And these are people's homes that we're dealing with. And we want to make sure that they're safe for habitation and that there's nothing that we're doing that is impacting them adversely. You can expect more information about this sometime in March. This is highly complex work, and we want to make sure that we're getting it right. So investigations take a little bit of time. So expect more information on that later this month.
Thanks, Trevor. Is that clear enough for the moment?
That's perfect. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay, I'll just open it up to any of our other colleagues. If there's anything you want to add, or I know we've got, like I said, really happy that Julie joined us here, Community Development Director. If anybody'd like to make any comments, hey, Julie, thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Please feel free to do so. This is the last call for questions or comments.
Hey, James, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah. Hey, Mike.
Hi, James. Mike Funk, acting city manager here in Minnetonka. So welcome Julie Wishnack. So thanks for acknowledging her. And then we also have council member Brian Kirk here on the line as well. Just a quick question. And Ms. Wishnack has been really involved, and a lot of other city officials have been involved in this project. So thanks for all the work you're doing. Just a question on the timeline. Obviously, 36 months delay is pretty obvious, and so I don't need to spend time on that. But is there what confidence does the Met Council have that either that timeline could be shortened up due to maybe filling the funding gaps if that's identified sooner, or a concern of another overrun that it gets delayed further? 2027 is a long ways out, and certainly I think I can speak for our city that certainly we'd love to get it done sooner than later. And so just what can you comment in terms of your confidence in knowing that 36 months is it, and is there anything that could change in either the funding gap to speed up the construction, or other risks that you may see in terms of a further delay? Thank you.
Good questions. Thanks, Mike. Again, Trevor, if you want to chime in as well, I think in answer to your, the correlation between the funding gap and the timeline, I don't think that's as much of an issue as just the nature of the construction for that tunnel. I don't recall how many 100-foot segments there are, but the secant wall and the construction of that tunnel has to be done sort of 100-foot segments, and there's several complex parts to do, variables to each section that you have to complete. Because we have such a narrow corridor, we've got to get the soil in and out, and it requires us to go in sort of a linear direction. So most of that time, I believe it's 34 months or so, if you do the math for how long it takes to complete each one of those, we call them pods, I think, and to finish the full number of pods to complete that tunnel basically is what is really pushing out our schedule. It's really the bottleneck right there. So I don't know if it's as much having to do, Mike, with locating funding sources. I think we're all pretty confident we'll be able to work that piece through, as much as it is just that, the time needed to construct, responsibly, safely, solidly, that tunnel. I don't know, Trevor, you want to add anything in the Congo to that?
Yeah, I'll add some stuff. And just for people that don't know me, I'm Trevor Roy. I'm the communications person for the project. When it comes to schedule, we talk with our contractors on a daily basis, of course, to see how we can shorten this timeline. And I can tell you with full confidence that there is a lot of will to get that schedule shortened. So they're looking at things like different staging of construction activities, different staging of systems activities. And an important thing to remember too is that there is a significant amount of testing after the systems and civil contract is complete. So you folks are going to see empty trains going up and down the line, and that may raise a few eyebrows. So we're looking at ways to expedite that process as well. So how much that schedule is going to be shortened is something that I'm not going to be able to say because I would be buying a lottery ticket. But this is it is on the forefront of everyone's minds. As the Met Council and as a project, and I know as a community, we were all disappointed that we're not riding the train right now. And we are definitely looking at ways to speed up that process towards opening day.
Yeah, I would just want to second that. Mike, we're all extremely motivated, the contractor, everyone, to get it done as quickly as we can. We all realize sort of the high stakes here and wanting to move that forward and not to drag this out. So every effort is being made to do that. And as far as your question about, certainty about anything that could possibly push that out even further, again, like to Trevor's point, I don't think we certainly hope not. We're certainly taking every precaution at this point to do due diligence. And we've got, as he mentioned, we've got some significant subcontractors and just done something like the review of the Sika towers, but we also have very professional and competent people, working for very large companies with a lot of experience in engineering firms who are all working together to try to minimize that possibility. I think.
And if I could go back to the tunnel for a second too, I don't know how familiar people are with what kind of tunnel that we're constructing. It's fairly similar to the one that crosses Highway 62, just a lot bigger, but it's a supported excavation. So that means pretty much we dig a big trench, put up retaining walls or sheet piling to keep the dirt back, construct a tunnel in the middle of it, and bury it. The issue that we run into is that we had some soil issues close to the Sika complex, and we needed a more robust method of keeping that soil back, hence the secant wall. It's important to note that tunnel construction in other cells, specifically moving towards Cedar Lake Parkway, will be ongoing. We'll still be doing concrete work as that secant wall is constructed. Issue with secant walls, they're expensive and they take a while. So that is something that is just from an engineering standpoint is a little out of our control.
Hey, Trevor, approximately how many feet of concrete will be at the bottom of that tunnel?
Well, it varies due to the water table. So it's, there's anywhere from, I think it's like 10 feet to 7 feet, a 7-foot slab.
Right.
That serves as the tunnel floor, we'll say. But it's because the tunnel is constructed underneath the water table, that concrete is poured, and it's a special type of concrete, and it displaces the water, which we then pump out. So it's a little bit more of an involved process than just laying a cement garage floor. Right. But we, like James said, we construct them in 100-foot cells, and we takes about 12 hours ish to get that floor done, and it has to be done in one sitting. So it's technical until you get out in the corridor. I always say this: people just do not have the frame of reference to just see what kind of a massive undertaking this is. It's very impressive. Just to put some friendly bar trivia out there for you, the amount of concrete that's used on this product or on this project, you could fill US Bank Stadium up to the goalposts. So it's serious.
Yeah.
One question on that. For those of us who are unfamiliar, could you maybe just briefly in broad terms describe the difference between a secant wall and like a basic retaining wall?
Sure. So, and I misspoke when I said retaining wall. It's a sheet pile. It's a big sheet of steel that's driven to a certain depth, and it keeps the dirt from backfilling back into the trench that you've dug. So it keeps workers safe, it keeps the product safe, it creates a safe work environment. Secant walls are a little bit more robust. Like I said, they're used very often. Secant walls are used all the time. But what it consists of is, imagine concrete silos that are poured into existing holes. So we auger out holes, we pour concrete in them, they interlock, and it's much more robust. It's an interlocked concrete wall underground.
Sure, that makes sense. So you're doing interlocked post holes as a way to basically even out any settling as a form of crack mitigation.
That was out of an abundance of caution that we switched to the secant wall. Like I said, in regards to the investigation, the investigation's ongoing. We don't know if it was us or if it was another environmental factor. Things happen in construction projects, but we're waiting for the investigation to give us some answers on that.
Is it a wall or a floor? So when you say secant wall, does that make the floor of the tunnel, or is this whole assembly actually sideways?
It is not a part of the tunnel structure at all. The tunnel will be constructed between the secant wall and the existing sheet piles.
Hey, Ray, if you obviously have access to the internet, you're here. But if you've been on our webpage at all, have you seen some of the project videos? Trevor actually does the voiceover and goes into this, like I said, in some details. It's just really well presented and very clear. You can see not just the secant wall and the construction of that, but all the additional parts and pieces that make up, the construction of this tunnel. I really recommend that. And I think, Trevor has just posted that link. Thank you, Trevor. Do you see that in the chat room, Ray? You can click on that and you get a nice visualization of that. Thank you, Trevor.
Yep.
Guys, click on the gun there. All right.
So I have a quick question here.
Sure.
This is Nathan. Because someone had asked about speeding up the timeline and stuff, but the civil construction, including the tunnel, won't be done until sometime in 2025, correct?
Well,
I think that's what I read on one of your slides.
I don't know if it's in 2025 the civil construction. I know we've got here's the way I'll describe it. Nathan, it's Nathan. Is it Nathan? I've got all these names in front of me. Is that right?
Yeah, it's Nathan.
All right, thank you, Nathan.
It's Nathan.
Yep. Yeah. Basically, as I said, we broke the project down into these 16 segments, and a lot of work was done in Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, when we have schedules for each of those segments, right, to finish that civil work. And as they've been reevaluating the total schedule from tip to tail in the alignment, right, again, trying to move up the schedule, trying to do as much work as possible. We're already at 60%, so we're through quite a bit of it. As certain segments are completed, like Eden Prairie, like Opus in theory is supposed to be completed by the civil work by the end of this year, that will, and elsewhere, Hopkins, St. Louis Park, so on and so forth, that will enable the systems contractor to really get going. And that way we're kind of speeding things up. It's not like we're going to wait for the entire civil work to be done. We're going to hand those things over. We're in the process of doing that in Eden Prairie, handing some of that over to the civil contractor, finishing up those punch lists and the rest, so that they can therefore get going and just try to keep, the process rolling. So when we get to, 2024, right, or in 2025, it's like Trevor's point earlier, you're going to see a lot of that. Looks like it's completely done. You're going to see the catenaries up on the electrical system, right? The TPSS stations, the civil work, the bridges, tracks, all that will look like it's done, but it's going to just be slowed down, obviously not done in that Kenilworth area there, as we're needing, just for the sake of the methodology and what we need to do in order to construct that safely. And like I said, solidly, to get through that, it just requires time, unfortunately. But a lot of it around it, maybe even on the other end, but certainly on the west side, will look like it's completely done. And like I said, we'll just try to keep advancing that schedule as much as possible. Every opportunity we get, right, by doing some testing, whatever we can do, we're going to try to push that out. So
okay, thank you.
I can't say in 2025, all the civil will be completed. I mean, again, as I indicated earlier, we are putting the finishing touches on sort of that new baseline schedule, right? And the long lead items, the critical path, and what we need to get done first. See, there's also a sequence and an order, right? Certain things take longer. We need to address those first. They take, they're ongoing as opposed to some of the other civil work. So it's a complex, and remember, it's 14 and a half miles, right? St. Croix Bridge was a mile, complex in its own right. And the stadium is a footprint, right? And this is 14 and a half miles of 44 new structures. So it's complex planning. But so it'll go be, it sounds, the tunnel construction is obviously probably going to, civil construction may go beyond 2025. I don't know. We're going to move as quickly as we can. But a lot of the rest of it should be done by then.
Got it. Makes sense. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. All right. It is 6:33. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Sorry, it's gone dark in here and I haven't turned my lights on, so I don't know. It must look like an alien sitting here. No. All right, everybody. Then again, just thanks again. Like I said, thanks for Julie, Councilman Kirk attending this. Thanks for all the residents of Minnetonka making the time. We really appreciate it. It's nice to see your faces and hear your questions. And if you have any follow-up now or anytime, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to meet you, love to talk to you, and provide any information I can. I wish you all a very good night. Thanks again.